The first step in looking for real estate, it's so funny because it's the hardest step in starting a business, and it's not specific to real estate. So we break it up into what we call the 3 C's of real estate. The way we focus in, we look at C number 1, which is your customer, right? Identifying your customer. Most business owners, when they're first starting out, they don't want to. They want everybody, because we need, like, bottom line, we need money, right? And we will do business with anybody who wants our service or product. But from a real estate marketing, all of that stuff, the better we can identify who that person is. The national brands I work with don't say, hey, Mark, we need space in Albany. They say, hey, Mark, we need, families of 4 with disposable income, in these markets. And then we go look for the people. We don't look for the space, right? And that's really the key to succeeding, especially if you're looking at retail. The second one is convenience, right? Because we live in a world where none of us have enough time. We all get frustrated.
Today we're having a very special episode where it's actually our first expert guest and our first 3-person podcast, right?
I think so, yeah.
I brought Troy. Give me a little spotlight on Troy. I brought Troy back in. You guys would be familiar with him at this point. I needed to augment my lack of expertise in this area to help ask the best questions so we can get the most out of this conversation with our special expert guest, Mark Cardone. Thank you so much for joining the show. How are you today, sir?
Guys, I'm doing amazing. Thanks for having me on. This is super exciting.
It's a pleasure. I'm super happy that Renee connected us and made this happen. So, Mark, start us off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, kind of how you got to be there.
For sure, yeah. Let's see. I started in real estate, commercial real estate, back in 2006. I actually got fired from a job, and I had to find a job. So I applied at 2 different places. I applied at a local bank, and I applied at a local real estate development company. I apparently didn't qualify to be a bank teller, or there were too many applicants. So I got hired by, I started with Pyramid Companies, with Bob Conjal doing mall leasing. Pyramid, they own Crossgates out in Albany. They own Palisades, probably closer down by you guys, Middletown Mall. So I did enclosed mall leasing with them for about 2 years. Great education in real estate. I went in knowing nothing, like literally zero about real estate. I don't even think I was really involved in my house, at all in negotiating that. So started with them. I was there for about 2 years, got a little bit of gray hair, learned a ton working with, national brands, local tenants. And the cool thing about Pyramid is really working with everybody from like limited brands all the way down to, local mom and pop barber, right? So you really get that breadth of everybody. One of the guys that was there as a financial rep left and went to work for like a local real estate developer who owned shopping center space, so just like the little signs in the window that that everybody calls. And he recruited me over there. They owned property really from New York all the way out to the Midwest. And I did all of their phone answering or cold calling or leasing or whatever, to fill the spaces that they had available. And it was a great experience. I learned a ton about the landlord side of the business, which was a good thing. But one of the things that, I really learned was that, companies like TJX, companies like Burger King, all the big national companies were really good at negotiating because they had played in that game multiple times and made mistakes. And the people who got the worst deals were always the small businesses because they went in saying, look, what's the rent? I'm going to negotiate the lowest rent I can get. And they would get the worst deal terms. They get low rents, but really terrible deal terms. And a lot of them would end up going out of business because of the deals they struck with that landlord. So after about, 8-9 years there, I said, hey, look, I want to work on the other side of the table. So I started a tenant representation company where, we work with different national, regional retailers, helping them with site selection and negotiating. So basically I kind of flipped the table and said, look, I want to work on behalf of the business owners. And then around 2016, 2017, we got involved with SBDC in Onondaga County, kind of advising, the people there how to correctly negotiate, what to watch out for, kind of the things they weren't looking at, right? Just like an attorney, like it's not so much what's in the documents, it's what's not in the documents that you have to watch out for. real estate's very similar. So we're kind of here just working on behalf of the small businesses, trying to get them the best deals they can get.
That's amazing. It's very it's serendipitous, I guess, that you like the landscape of your future and your present and current endeavors were all based on bank tellers slots not being available. You
Yeah,
know,
isn't that great?
imagine how different life would have been.
Getting fired from a sales job I was terrible at, not being able to get a job at a bank, and then here I am, almost 20 years later, doing this. So
Incredible. And
yeah.
I would say that, I mean, with your collaborations now with the SBDC, how many people have you benefited in this particular way? This is an incredible journey. Thank you for sharing. And just to cover what topics we want to hit during this show, we're going to talk about kind of what the perspective of somebody who is considering, like a small business that's considering buying or leasing commercial real estate. We're also going to be looking at kind of like the details. And you brought out two specific points that I had made notes of that I really wanted to talk about, which was location and negotiations. And it's just like, oh, that's like your special. Like, how perfect does that work? And then the current market conditions, what people need to know, what are the options, and what are the considerations. So that's gonna. I appreciate that that's going last, and we're gonna end on maybe not the most positive light note. We'll see if we can.
We'll
turn
keep
it
it
around.
positive.
Yeah, we'll keep it positive.
It's all good. It's all positive.
Yeah. So to start out, I guess probably the most base question are like, what are the factors that a person that's considering either leasing or purchasing commercial real estate for their business, what are the key factors that they should consider before
Yeah.
going into this process?
It's a really good question, and it's something a lot of people get incorrect, right? Because what they do is they think, okay, space, and then the first thing small business owners think about is they think money outlay, right? So if I get space, I have to spend money, right? And what I would say, I started, my own real estate company in 2013, literally from my couch, watching Netflix in my pajama pants, right? And I did that for 3 or 4 months, and I have 2 kids at home. I have a wife who I love amazingly. And unfortunately, like, working from home was great. It was convenient. And I mean, it's funny talking about this in this like post-COVID pandemic world that we're in, where everybody's pro working from home. I got a ton of laundry done. I mean, I played Play-Doh with my kids a lot during the workday. But like, like, as much as you can say, hey, my office is in the basement and I'm working right now. There's a part of you inside, if you're like a good human being, who goes, I'm ignoring the other people in the house, right? So really the first thing to examine is, like, if I get space, what will I do with it, right? And how will it increase my revenue? Because any space, if you're going to get a space, it should make you more money. There's no reason to get it if it's not going to. And what I tell, even people who work from home.
What a simple sound point.
Yep. And what I tell people who work from home is, like, even if it just buys you 2 hours in silence and isolation, right? Like Superman had the Chamber of Solitude too. If it gets you that 2 hours to just work on your business and not be in it, it's beneficial. And there's a lot of good resources for free and low cost space out in the world, especially now. Every attorney in the world has people working from home, and they have empty rooms, right? So for a few bucks a month, they might let you use it, maybe even for free if you build a good partnership with them. So I think that's really step one, is realizing whatever space you get, it needs to make more profit for you, and how is it going to do that?
Troy, you do a lot of advising with people in this area. This office, the Farmingdale SBDC office, really leans on you for your expertise in getting attaining capital that people didn't know that was available to them in order to get these spaces. What are your thoughts in response to Mark, and just like, how do you kind of counsel people through this part of it?
Yeah.
In the initial consideration phases.
Sure. Well, Mark touched upon a critical, first step, which is, asking yourself, why do you need the space? As he said, is it going to make you money? That's critical. You have to look at it as how is it going to benefit your business? Is it necessary at this point? If you're if you're starting with a home-based business and you're identifying that, I need to move into a location, or I need, a commercial kitchen, let's use that as an example. Have you outgrown your capacity where you are in order to require that next move? It depends on the business, but I agree wholeheartedly with what he said as far as, taking a really close look at why you need it, and is it going to make you money? Because at the end of the day, that's why we're in business, to make money. So
100%. I think that may be a problem that people run into, because when we say this, it's like, duh, obviously this is what you need to consider. But I think a lot of people confuse having space with, or like conflating it with success, with making that next move, with being legitimate and official. Because it's one thing to work from your house. Like I have clients now, numerous clients that have specialty food lines and items, and they will they work out of commercial kitchens and they work out of their house, and then they go to vendor events and they go and they work these deals, but they don't feel, there's a sense that they don't feel like complete or legitimate business entities, because they don't have an actual, not even necessarily storefront, but just a place that is their place of business. It's like they're just shifting around. And so I think it's an important thing to acknowledge, is exactly what you guys were saying, is that kind of trying to check the emotions in regard to, it's going to make me feel this way once I have it, because you have to, maybe you can check that with the emotion of the way you're going to feel when it hits your wallet in your bank account.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is perception, and a lot of entrepreneurs get caught up in that. How am I being perceived? And that is important. You want to present, an image and a brand that is, cohesive with the client base you're seeking, but don't just seek things for that perception value alone. We have to tie, a dollar figure to it, and examine that area of it. And I think that's what, Mark hit on, with his comment initially, that I think is critical.
100%. So diving into, so if let's say, Mark, that we have somebody who worked out their business plan, has their business model in place, has been operating, and is in a financial position that enables them to purchase or to lease a space. How would you advise people to consider location of that space?
It's a really good question, right? And I think, when we talk to small businesses, there's always three people, right? There's the people who are just starting, the people who are midway in, and then there's the people who may have a space, have 2, 3, 4 spaces, and they don't know what to do, right? And I'm glad, because today we're going to hit all three of those, a little bit based on our question line, and the way you guys lined it up was perfect. But the first step in looking for real estate, it's so funny, because it's the hardest step in starting a business, and it's not specific to real estate. Because we get into that the 3 L's of real estate, right? Location, location, location. You say that, and it's almost become like a little bit of a, doesn't mean anything to anybody. Like, what does that even mean? So we break it up into what we call the 3 C's of real estate, right? And I just want to buzz through them real quick, and then we can go back and kind of talk. But what we start with is we say, look, boiling the ocean is expensive and takes a really long time, right? Making a pot of coffee or a cup of coffee, we're all drinking one right now, quick and easy, inexpensive, because it's focused, right? So when people have trouble finding space, it's usually because they come to me and they say, Mark, I need a space somewhere, really anywhere that's cheap, right? It's too broad, it's hard to do. So the way we focus in, we look at C number 1, which is your customer, right? Identifying your customer. Most business owners, when they're first starting out, they don't want to, they want everybody, because we need, like, bottom line, we need money, right? And we will do business with anybody who wants our service or product, but from a real estate marketing, all of that stuff, the better we can identify who that person is. The national brands I work with don't say, hey, Mark, we need space in Albany. They say, hey, Mark, we need, families of 4 with disposable income, in these markets. And then we go look for the people. We don't look for the space, right? And that's really the key to succeeding, especially if you're looking at retail, right? So really, it's identifying your customer, and not only the people who support you, but Like, who's spending money right now on that stuff that you do? Okay. The second one is convenience, right? Because we live in a world where none of us have enough time. We all get frustrated when our phone lags for 5 seconds, right? And people will switch and go somewhere else if you're inconvenient for them, right? If you work with the elderly, they don't want you to work from home. They want somewhere to go, right? Dealing with technology is not their forefront. So convenience for them is leaving their house and maybe going to your office, right? But on the other side, if you work with a younger demographic, leaving the house and going to your office may be a pain for them. They may want that option. So understanding where your person is and meeting them there is crucial. And the last one that nobody talks about, that's really the most important way to get your revenue there as quickly as you can, is co-tenancy, right? And what co-tenancy is it's putting your business near other businesses who serve the same customer, right? The same type of customer. So you can work together. And I always use the example when we're teaching is, we have a home inspector in our building. Home inspectors don't, I mean, I do commercial real estate, but we have 20 residential real estate agents in our office. Home inspectors can work out of their car. But, because this guy's a nice guy, good at what he does, and he brings us donuts once a quarter, like, how much of our business do you think he gets for that $500 a month he spends for his office? Like, I can't even imagine, versus having to, compete by dropping off flyers and doing all the other stuff. So customer, convenience, co-tenancy. If you lock those three things in, then the space just shows up. It magically appears in front of you.
The first two seem very kind of obvious, like intuitive. Like you hear it and you're like, yep, that makes sense. Yep, that makes sense.
Well, it's not always,
Right.
and I'm listening, and Mark, I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, we could dissect any of the three C's, but I'm thinking of convenience right now. Something as little as scout out the location you're seeking. Go see it. Go see it during different times of day. I've seen customers who've run into issues where they realize after the fact the parking's not adequate. The egress is horrible. Nobody wants to pull in the lot because they can't get out. Businesses die because of that. I have one by me in a very popular five-corner area. Every business that's gone in there sadly has not made it. And the reason why is because all the locals do not want to go into the lot. They'll never get out. But as somebody who's not from the area, they don't realize that. But had they scouted the location, maybe they would have seen, wow, this is a problem in the morning. This is a huge problem. So, not always do people look at that.
No, you're 100% right. And I knew that we had talked about that as well before with one of your clients regarding, I think, having drive-through, like a drive-through capacity, or the amount of parking that they had at their establishment wasn't enough for the type of business that they were operating.
Yeah.
The best example, I mean, one of the most successful coffee chains in the world, right? When they pick their locations, it's right hand side of the road on your drive to work, right? It sounds like in your ear, it goes, oh, obviously, right? Because if they're on the left side, I got to hook a left through traffic. I got to hook another left through traffic to get back. And look, if they're at a red light, that's great, but it's still more time, right? And when I'm 5 minutes late for work, the Keurig's the Keurig's getting my business that day. Right, but if they're
it's actually a brilliant point. Like
Yeah.
on my drive to this office, I could go to Dunkin' Donuts, which is across the street on the left, or I could go to Starbucks, which is on the right. And no preference towards either, preference towards coffee and caffeine. But if I'm like, why would I go and loop around and then have to fight traffic coming back around again?
Convenience,
It's such a brilliant point.
Yeah.
What are some of the other points of but I stick on maybe the first one a little bit. I know you dove in slightly talking about how the bigger folks target their model, or position themselves to target their customers. What else like how can you choose a piece of real estate, or how can you choose a location that is conducive to like your target? What are some other factors or strategies that go into play with that? Like, is the type of building?
It's a great question, and I think one of the easiest ways to do it, which people get awkward about, is you look for your customer, you look where they're buying your product now, and then you just kind of go out and say, where are my competitors? Like what, like if I'm opening a sandwich shop and I know, there's 4 sandwich shops in my town, which one's doing the best, right? Now, not only that, but what's it near? Like what's near? So they all kind of work together, you know what I mean? But you look, if you're opening a pizza shop, one of the best places to do it is next to dance schools, karate schools, places where, there's families with disposable income who don't have time to make dinner, right? So you think about that and you go, this is my spot, right? Every sector of business usually has like some kind of thing that just naturally works. Like where are those customers already conveniently when I need them near the other things they need? So that's how that all flows together. And the call I hate is somebody goes, I love that space because it's close to my house. You know what I mean? That just completely like
Convenient for you.
Right. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I love my product. I use it all the time. Nobody else wants it, but it works. So that business is not going to function like that.
I don't understand why my business isn't booming.
Yeah. Now, really, following up with this, the biggest question we get is, okay, so how do we find it, right? Because different areas, especially in New York, have different searchability for real estate, right? Because people love to search online, right? We all know the big real estate search sites. Commercial real estate is a lot harder to find for a few different reasons, right? Number one, especially in smaller markets, the big marketing platforms charge you to put property on it, and I don't know if you guys know a lot of local building owners. They don't usually budget $400 or $500 a month to put something on a website. You know what I mean? So a lot of times those spaces are hard to find on the internet. There's LoopNet, which is a good source. CrackC is one that's like quickly taking over. If you guys have show notes, I can give you kind of the list. Facebook Marketplace is Facebook Marketplace. If you find stuff on there, good luck. There's jokes about it for a reason, right? But really the best way to find space is to go through that process, find the buildings you like, and then call the people who own the buildings and see if they have space rolling. Because people leave spaces all the time, right? And every 6 months a space will open up. So sometimes it's just having that patience to do the work and that patience to and if you use a real estate agent, this is something you should ask them to do, right? Like, I want to be in these 5 buildings. Can you find out if they have space coming? Because the internet, like the space, real quick, Troy, like the space you were talking about on the corner, the one that nobody succeeds in, I guarantee you there's 10 business owners calling a real estate agent saying, that's been empty for like 20 years, I should get it for free, right? And even if they did, right, they're going to get it for free and then they're going to still be out of business in 3 months. So the ones that are sitting, that are on the internet, that have the signs in the windows, sometimes it's harder to make those work.
I'm interested in your thoughts on, I'm trying to tie this back to the clients that we see, and excuse me, we're talking about, both leasing and purchasing real estate, which, could be 3 other podcasts, in addition to this. We're just trying to scratch the surface here for people. For our office, and I can't speak for other centers, but majority of what we see here are people who are looking, to lease space for their business. We do get clients coming in to purchase quite often. They're buying the business as well. Whatever the situation may be. But once someone has gone through some of these steps that you've outlined of identifying a location, let's say, to lease on Main Street or whatever it may be, what is the order of operations to now try to get into that space? Because, to me, it seems there are so many first steps that you could take. It's a matter of figuring out which one to put first, that the space is actually available to your business use, what permits you might need. People are going to need to spend some money out of the gate just to see if a space is viable. And that's something we try to impart on our clients. So I'm curious your thoughts and walk us through the process. And I know it might not be a one size fits all for everybody, but just a general overview that folks could think about if they found a location. What do they do?
I love that. That was a great question, and there's like a couple things in there, and number one, like, I love leasing space, right? National companies love leasing space. Buying buildings is really something that's been, I guess it's been almost adapted from residential, where there's that mindset that, like, well, if I rent my house and I don't own myself, I'm not wealthy, which I don't think it's true, but I think that mindset is in the world where, like, people who rent aren't as well off as people who buy, and it's made its way into the commercial world where really the best companies in the world lease space, right? Because they want that money for operating capital. It's not saying there's not a lot of advantages in purchasing real estate. There's a lot of tax advantages. There's a lot of benefits to purchasing real estate. What I tell people is just don't let buying or leasing keep you from getting a location where you're going to make a lot of money. Because we've seen that when private equity takes over, national brands, they say, well, we only want properties that we can buy. And unfortunately, most of the good properties people want to hold on to. They don't sell them, so really be open to leasing. It's a very low cost way into space. It's very low obligation, right? And leading into the other part of what you said, kind of what are the things you should do? You find the space, you find out it's available. We should go look at it, and preferably once you have a good feel, bring a contractor with you to give you an idea of what needs to be done to make it what you want. Because I like to say anything can be done with money, right? You can change a pizza shop into an office space. You can change anything, right? But understanding what that cash outlay is important both for loans, right, and for negotiating with your landlord to see if they'll do some of it for you. If I say, hey, Troy, I know you own the building. Will you replace the floor for me? And I don't know what that costs. That puts me at a disadvantage in the negotiating, right? So bring somebody with you who can give you just broad brush of what it's going to cost to convert the space. And then the third point you brought up, which is really important, is can I operate in the space, right? A lot of times you can ask the building owner, like, hey, is my use okay here? Because we all know there's things like zoning, right? There's retail, there's commercial, there's office, and there's 500 subsets. One of the ones we run into the most issues with is people who have pet-related uses because they have to be a certain distance away from houses. They have to, so I think asking the person who owns the building is a great step just to make sure that it's already zoned for that. But call the town you're in and just ask, and that's a great way to also get your business promoted, right? Because the towns love to know what's going on in their area. So asking the town, having a good conversation with the town, and then if that building's not a fit, they may say, you know what, you can't go here, but you can go into any of these places, and it'll open up a whole new realm. But all of that really, before you even ask what the rent is, right? Like you should be going through that part of the process to make sure it even matters at that point.
And on the landlord side, I think of a conversation I had with a client once. So he was looking for a space for, a food business. And he wasn't having any luck, and he was frustrated. And he said, all the landlords I call, the first question out of their mouth is, what do you want to put here? And I mentioned food, and they basically hang up. Well, a lot of landlords are very particular about what they want. There may already be a similar business that's in the strip, and they can't lease to you. So, doing the homework up front is really critical. You mentioned calling the municipality for zoning and whatnot. That's huge. The last thing you want to do is get yourself into a lease and then find out that you have all these obstacles in front of you. I'm sure you've seen that as well. So, what you're sharing, I think, is critical, and it's good practice for people who may be watching. That this is a very serious undertaking, and make sure that you're doing your own due diligence, because the landlord's going to look out for the landlord. Make sure you have a good team in place that understands this, that can help you, so you don't do it alone.
Yeah, and speaking to the town's a great thing because there's multiple levels of this isn't allowed here, right? If somebody calls and says, I want to put a restaurant in your building, there might be 2 other restaurants, and the town just says your parking is maxed out. We can't do another thing because of the parking requirements, right? But then, we had a roller skating rink that's opening that had to go through, just basically a variance, and the only problem was it was going to take 60 days. So we had to talk to the landlord and say, hey, you know how we're going to start paying you rent? We can't start paying you rent until this goes through. We can't even have the lease in effect until that's approved, right? So just making sure you understand, you kind of know, talking to the town, there's so much value in that.
I think this is a beautiful place to segue into negotiations. So once you're going out there and you're bringing the contract, you're getting a feel of what the renovations are going to cost or the whatever conversions that are required, and you are looking at, kind of starting to look at the numbers from the outside perspective. How do you identify key points of leverage for negotiating? How do you put yourself in a position of strength to come into that conversation?
So I think it's really just about knowing what's important, right? I mean, we always say don't ask what the rent is, right? Because you asking the car salesman how much the car costs is kind of a moot point, right? What you should be doing is you should be, prior to having financial conversations, you should be talking to other business owners. Talk to the SBDC or the SBA. I mean, how many people have you put into space? Have you guys alone, right, put into spaces that you could reach out to and say, hey, how much are you paying for that similar type of space, right? Small business owners want to help small business owners, right? So I think doing a little bit of due diligence, even just a Google search of like, what does this type of space cost in my market, is a great first step, because everybody asks what the rent is first, right? And it's really, you don't want to be scared away when they say a number that's too high if the market rates are a lot lower than that, or if you find out someone else in the building's paying a third of what that person's paying, right? But then really it's just making sure that there are a lot of other points in the lease that have to be discussed, right? And we talk about four main ones. Number one is how rent increases, right? Because rent goes up, taxes go up, right? Things go up, but understanding that that's all negotiable, right? And you can control some of that. The second one is how long your lease needs to be, especially with the SBA, because if you're leasing space and you get a loan that's a 10-year loan, you need 10 years of control on the space, right? Doesn't mean you have to do a 10-year lease, but you need 10 years of control. So understanding how long your lease is and what happens when your lease ends, how it extends, how it renews. The third one is tenant responsibility. Who pays for what when it breaks? This is one of the keys that people miss, and what's the landlord? Like you said, Troy, the landlord looks out for themselves. They're going to say, hey, if the roof leaks, we'll fix it. If the building falls over, we'll re-put it up, right? But everything else is your responsibility. That's all negotiable. It's something you can, negotiate, have a contractor look at. People get their homes inspected, get the space inspected, have someone check it out. And then the last one is the issue of personal guarantees. People are terrified about personal guarantees. And if you're leasing an office space for $50 a month from an attorney who's a friend, this doesn't really apply, right? But if you're signing, we say the perfect lease term is 3 to 5 years. If you're signing a 3 to 5 year lease and you go out of business in 3 months, right, there's recourse from that landlord because you're defaulting. So understanding how to limit that, how to mitigate it, it's very hard to get rid of. You guys know liability is liability, but it can be mitigated, right? And knowing how to do that and trying to negotiate, that's a really important part of the process.
Right. How important would you say? I mean, I kind of know what your answer is going to be, but having legal representation in your corner during this process, I think it's important to stress that, because there may be folks out there who are thinking, "Oh, I got this. I can handle this." Since the pandemic, landlords have really, sharpened their pens, on these leases, and I think you'd be doing yourself a tremendous disservice by not having somebody looking out for your best interest. What are your thoughts on that?
So I have, so this is going to be good. From the beginning, bail team, right? Have the bail team. Make sure you have an attorney ready to review documents on a phone call, okay? And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of this is pre-lease horror story, right? Because we just ran into this. We had a client through the SBA who was kind of out looking at space before we started working with her, right? Which happens very often. They get frustrated, and then the SBDC says, hey, give Mark a call. An agent she met with a national real estate company said, hey, I'll show you these other spaces, but you need to sign this document saying I'm representing you if you take the space, right? Very normal thing for real estate people to do. and this was about a year ago that they did this. News broke that she was opening a business, and she asked them if she could terminate the contract. They said no. They never sent her any property or anything. But about 8 months later, she's opening a business, and they call and say, "Hey, we're pursuing you on that. We're gonna chase you for this amount of money that you owe us, to the tune of about 10 grand, right?" Not only that, but it also said, "Hey, you also have to pay us anytime you renew your lease." Right? So this was like a hyper predatory contract for a small business owner, right? Is it pursuable? I don't really think so. But when I looked at it, the first thing it said at the bottom is have an attorney review this if you don't understand it, right? And when someone's giving you a document, what I see happen a lot is like someone puts a document in front of you and they explain, they go, "This is what this says, sign it," right? The problem is when someone's doing that is they're not telling you the bad stuff it says, they're just telling you the general stuff that it says, right? So from the beginning, before you sign any documents with anybody, me included, like the SBDC trusts me, have an attorney review my docs too and make sure they're fair, right? Get an attorney, 2-page document. It would have cost her $300 probably to have it reviewed, if that. And now she's going to be in a lawsuit for 10 grand. So important. During the lease, do not sign a lease without an attorney. It would be the craziest thing somebody could do, right? Because like we said earlier, it's not what's in the document, the stuff that you're reading. Because what people do is we read a lease and we make sure there's nothing wrong with it. But it's the stuff that's not in there. What happens if the landlord doesn't fix something that they're supposed to? They never put that in there, right? You need a self-help clause in. You need something that says, if you don't fix it in 30 days, I can do it and take it off my rent. So all of those things that systematically, like the landlords don't put that in there on purpose, right? Because they don't want to pay for that stuff. You need to have an attorney who knows what they're doing, putting it in. And then the last thing I just want to touch on real quick, post-pandemic, right? Listen, the number of phone calls I got March 14th, 2020, I'm out of business, I can't pay my rent, what do I do, right? And there's a clause in most leases, it's called force majeure. And what it basically says is, look, if there's a war, if there's a government event, if there's a catastrophe, this lease is on hold, right? And there was a lot of discussion, does that apply for a global pandemic, right? And some landlords were cool with it, some weren't. But really what it came down to was whether or not the landlord's lender would let them out of the mortgage for those months, right? Because if they still had to pay the mortgage, they had to collect rents from the tenants to keep the ball rolling. So just making sure that something we learned in kind of this new world is make sure there's something in there that says, if for some reason I can't operate out of my own control, I don't have to pay rent. This is super important right now.
What an insight. Yeah. Especially like if we're outside of things, everything runs through the lens of the pandemic and COVID and response and everything. But to look at that on a larger scale, would things like unforeseen medical situations fall into that same kind of category? Or that's just personal, like, but it's like if an outside entity or an outside force exerts, impact on you, like an earthquake, that maybe doesn't wreck your business physically, but impacts people's ability to travel to and from.
I mean, we've had people write in, if I pass away, the lease is gone, right? Which I think kind of is a natural thing to put in a lease, right? Like if something happens to me, I get hit by a bus, and it's not under my LLC, it's under my personal name, then the lease goes away. And then we've had landlords say, no, we want you to get an insurance policy that'll pay off the rest of the lease, right? Which, like, it depends on it all depends on your deal, right? If a landlord gives you $30,000 to do work in a space, yeah, they're going to want that money back regardless, right? Because that's a loan, that's a different kind of thing. But really, we're talking about, hey, if the government comes in and says you're done, you can't open, everything's got to hold, right? And even the landlords who didn't pursue, they had accrued, these large numbers of rent, and then when everything went back to normal, they said, you don't have to pay it all back to us, but we want this, that, or the other thing, and it just put all the businesses at a disadvantage.
I mean, think about that part of it, 100%. I really appreciate that you brought up, because one of the questions I was going to ask was regarding particular clauses or common pitfalls that businesses run into within the lease agreement. But I think that you really hit the nail on the head that it's likely not what's in the agreement, it's what's not in it. And it's hard to know what's not in it unless you have, like Troy was saying, like you were saying, Mark, if you don't bring in that kind of legal representation and have that third set of eyes take a look at it.
It's so important. And I've had clients who have gone into this without legal representation, and it terrifies me. I don't know why you would do that, but it does happen. I think it's important to you said build the bail team. Have your attorney. If you're seeking space for a particular business type, seek out the other team members who have done this before. If you're going to open up a restaurant, go after an architect who's done this before, who's familiar with the requirements of the space. I mean, there are so many things you run into when you get to that point, dealing with health department. And, I have to have a certain capacity hot water heater for this business. Or, there are so many things that go into it. Right. So it's money well spent to build your team, properly right off the bat, with professionals like Mark and an attorney, an architect, so on and so forth. I mean, that's just my experience.
And the people that aren't familiar with the bail team concept, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's banking, accounting, insurance, and legal. Is it in that general theme? Is that right?
Real estate.
And Baylor.
Real estate.
Yeah, I don't know what the E is yet, but Baylor.
So I think it's is there anything else that we wanted to cover before we shift into the third part of this show?
No, I just want to cap those four things real quick because they're so important, right? Because we always think rent, but it's really the things that put people out of business, and these are the four things that we look at in every doc. It's the increases in rent, right? Because every landlord asks for whatever their increases are, and 3% over 30 years is a lot of money, right? It's 90%. So you want to make sure you control that. The term, right? You can't lose a lease. All you can do is not prepare enough control over the document, right? So making sure you have control long-term over the space, which you can do through term and option periods. Making sure you limit your exposure on repairs, right? Because if something breaks that is $20,000, you don't want to have to pay for that. And then just that guarantee section, just make sure you know how much, like if everything, and unfortunately, I hate talking about this because we have to, right? But if the world ends and you just don't make it, you're going to have some bills, right? And limiting what that bill is a good step to take. So those are really those four things that I can't stress enough how important they are, more important than the rent.
Yeah, and it can be very counterintuitive to the energy that somebody has going into seeking the building. They find the place that's pretty, it fits with what their vision is, and they try to figure out the rent and see if they can afford it or not. And all of those things are really what's going to make or break the business in the short and long term. All right, let's get to the fun part. Let's get to the fun block of the show. All right, so current market conditions for commercial real estate. So I guess let's talk just real briefly, kind of overview. What are the trends that we're seeing? What are the kind of the keynotes that are worth diving into from your perspective and what you're seeing when it comes?
So here's what I'm going to say. Number one, you guys are killing it because most of the people looking for space are small businesses, right? So the SBA is killing it. We have more small businesses looking for space than I think we've ever had. Like when I look through my whiteboard, I would say 50 to 60% of them are startup small business owners who are really getting going, well put together. But if you break it up into the sectors, like retail is doing really, really well right now. Restaurants, service storefronts, a little bit less like, gift shops and boutiques, but there are a lot of boutiques that are opening. A lot of them are people who maybe had Etsy stores or, built through the pandemic and are now starting to sell their things with some other things from other people. So retail is actually doing a lot better. When I left, my job in 2013 and told my parents I was going to focus on retail in the age of Amazon, they thought I was nuts. Retail space is really hard to get right now. It's very expensive and it's very high demand. Office space, small is busy, because I think really interesting thing that's happened. I think through the pandemic, everybody could start their own business from home and order business cards online. And those businesses that service other people, having, a $200 a month, $300 a month office is adding legitimacy, what business cards used to do before they were so easy to get, before you could order them online. Having a place, to meet people is starting to give a little bit of legitimacy to that coaching business or whatever that business is. And it's also letting them charge a little bit more because people see a expense, right? It's like a visual expense where, oh, this guy has an office, this lady has an office. I can pay them a little more. So we're starting to see that especially in those like coaching and consulting sectors, because right now they're all meeting at coffee shops or whatever, and being able to say, hey, meet me at my office just adds that like tinge of legitimacy that helps them. I don't talk about industrial because I live in Syracuse, New York, in the land of MICRON, and it is bonkers up here right now.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, sales for land and industrial space up here, and it's so funny because the mantra of the small businesses was always, well, I just want a pole barn, or I just want to. I don't know if you guys hear that there, but like up here, it's always like, well, I just need a pole barn to do this in. I mean, a pole barn is going to cost you almost $1 million right now. Building
And
it or buying it.
for people who are watching and listening, can you just give a quick snapshot of the Micron?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, we have a giant, microchip manufacturer who's signed all kinds of deals and is coming into town, kind of in our northern suburbs. I can't even tell you the total project, but they're going to bring a ton of employees, and it has made a real estate craze. And it's going to do great things for our local area, assuming everything goes according to plan. But another thing, right? People are just listening to the real estate people who give them the highest value on their property, and that always causes problems. So the market's probably doing really well right now. It's going to go kind of weird in a little while when things start to sit too long, and then you're going to have people who think their property is worth $3 million when it's worth, 400,000. So, but we're really excited up here for it. We have a lot of industrial happening. I don't understand much about industrial space. That you're talking lifts and things I've never used before. But industrial space always does well. It always either gets converted to multifamily, which also killing it right now. A lot of multifamily being built. So overall, things are good. I mean, things are a lot better in general across the country than people, kind of hear in the media.
That's very interesting. Because my next thought, unless you had something, Troy, my next thought was, what are the impacts of inflation, interest rates, and remote work? What kind of impacts have you seen on the commercial real estate market for those people that are looking to break in, whether it be the downstream effects of somebody who's trying to lease or a business that's looking to make a purchase of property?
Well, I mean, buying real estate, like buying commercial real estate, is just not great right now. Because interest rates are going up. We just got a click from the Fed that they're going to go up again, maybe 2 more times, right? I've talked to friends who say, hey, interest rates right now are going to look low in the next 3 to 4 years. So it's really about just making sure that you're looking at the interest rates and kind of making sure the value of the property. Because the other thing we're hitting is, like I was saying earlier, we don't have a lot of vacancy, right? We don't have a lot of stuff that's available. And the people who own the buildings are looking at that saying, this is an opportunity for me to sell my building at a premium. So not only do you have super high interest rates, but you have super high building expenses. So at the end of the day, it's about if you're buying a building, it's about what's your cash position, can you afford it, and what are those monthly payments going to look like. And as long as those things check out, I tell people, like, don't get too, when it comes to business real estate, the same building can be worth $1 million to one company and $100,000 to another. It all depends on how much money you're going to make there, right? People who get into it thinking, well, I'm never going to resell it for that. Look, if you're going to make an extra $300,000 a year because of the property, take that, fill in the gaps that way. Because I think that's a mistake people make, is they think, well, that building's overpriced, right? It might be for your business, it might not be for McDonald's. You know what I mean? So that's an important thing to look at.
Yeah, we get a lot of folks, again, tying it back to, our client base here. The folks who are looking to buy property, they're already operating their business out of this location. The landlord's looking to exit, and they're coming in, and this is brand new to them. They want to know what their options are. And with the interest rate environment being what it is, it is something that, they need to take into account. But if the numbers make sense, if the acquisition makes sense, and because it costs them a lot more probably to uproot and move a large operation, and start, anew. So, we are seeing, traction on that end, and thankfully, we have the option of, the SBA, loan programs that can help with that, which I think, are great for people who are in this position.
I mean, SBA 504 has been great up here. I think the other one's 7A. I'm not a finance guy, but SBA loans have been amazing. When the people have the ability to do that. If people have been in business less than 2 years, it's a little more complicated, right? One thing we're seeing a lot of in two different kind of segments is in situations like what you were just talking about, Troy, owner holding paper for short-term notes, right? So they'll take the down payment, they'll hold a note for 5 years on a 25-year AM with a balloon payment so that they have time to kind of regulate the market and get out of it. We're seeing that a lot. Make sure if you're getting into that kind of situation, you have real good legal representation. Banks are better because they're more secure, but if you're in a pinch and you need to do that, we're seeing building owners willing to do it. Really where we're seeing a lot of struggle right now, which I think this is a great topic, is people looking to exit strategy. We have a lot of, I get probably 2 calls a week from business owners who are just like, I gotta sell, I gotta get out. It's all the same story, right? I just don't want to reinvent the wheel after the pandemic. Employees are tough to get. All the stuff you guys hear every day. And it's usually capped with, I have an employee who's interested but doesn't have any money. And a lot of times we're seeing that that's where it ends up, right? It ends up us horse trading and giving it to the employee and figuring it out. But, that's really, I would say, one of the biggest opportunities in the market for people who are expanding and growing right now is in new business acquisition, because there's so many people who want to retire. And I know there's a lot of awkwardness in making that phone call, like calling that, other physical therapist who's got one location who is 100 years old and saying, hey, do you want to sell your business to me? But it's a lot easier, and I know it sounds like, oh, I'm going to have to spend money, but you don't have to spend all that time building your new client base, right? So that's something that we're really starting to look into and getting more involved in.
That's incredible. I actually, a colleague or a fellow service member that was in my unit, my very first unit in the Army, fell on really hard times, made some poor choices, ended up getting discharged less than honorably from the service, found himself on food stamps, and I promise all of this is relevant to what we're talking about here. So he ends up working at Foot Locker, and then decides that he wants to go into real estate. And he finds a woman, he gets married to her. She's in the Army. They have to move to DC for her job. She's going to go work at the White House. And so he goes up there and he's like, okay, well, I need to do something with myself. I can't be the Foot Locker husband, to my amazing wife. I'll get into real estate and see if I can make that work. He now owns his own real estate practice, like an entire practice that's in Louisiana. He's embedded in all of the schools. They're teaching the kids and showing them that there's a different path outside of, drug running and crimes, that what he experienced growing up, as the people that are successful and take care of their families do this. So this is where it ties in. The way he got successful was walking up those quarter-mile driveways to have beautiful houses that to talk with people that he's never met before, and to ask them if they were interested in selling their house. and he went with respect. He went with he did his research on the home and the area and everything, and that's how he did it. And so he embraced those uncomfortable situations. It's one of those things where, success can be relegated to the few who are willing to do what others are not willing to do. And so if you're willing to have those uncomfortable conversations, you can put yourself in a really advantageous position, especially given the landscape and the way that you laid it out. This huge transition, this mental and physical and emotional transition from the pandemic to our current state. Like, do you really want to spend, if you spent 30 years building and constructing this business that's successful, but do you really want to start over? Do you really want to build it back up, or do you want to look at that, retirement home down in Florida or Boca or wherever that's, I'm out.
Yeah.
So you could really present people with an opportunity that helps them and helps you if you're paying.
Hugely. And of course they're going to want too much money, and you're not going to want to pay enough money, but that's, look, my life, this is the great joke. Like, my life is making sure that at the end of the day, everyone's marginally unhappy with their deal, right? The guy who owns the building should be marginally unhappy. The business owner should be spending a little more than what they were comfortable with, because let's face it, right? Everybody does. So everyone's I make everyone marginally unhappy, and I get a 5-star review for it. That's I think I might put that on my business card.
I like that. Then it was a fair deal.
That's right. That's right.
Everyone's unhappy, but they're happy with me, so it's good. But so I mean, you do have those people. You have a lot of people who are in space right now, who are making hard decisions, thinking, do I need this much space, right? Especially in offices. I like to tell people, look, if you're getting a good deal, and I mean, like I said with the attorneys, people need the extra space. So if you can find other businesses who are looking for space to sublease, that's a great little side income generator inside space you already have. But if your lease is coming up due, it's a good time to start looking at what's out in the market and see if it's a time to relocate, downsize, or whatever.
I love that strategy for that segment of the business community, whether they're coaching or working professionals. They just need a space, to start that way and kind of ramp up and grow into a larger space where you have employees. But to just jump into things and think you're going to fill it over time, we've all seen that's a tough task. So
everybody should start small.
Yeah.
Starting small is look, if you have we just had a guy in Syracuse recently came through the SBDC, huge business plan. I mean, thought he was absolutely insane. Ton of money, big loan, renting space, paying more rent than I've ever seen an SBA client spend. And it's near our university, so they have these redevelopment plans where you can't sign a lease longer than 3 years. So not only is he taking out this massive amount of money, but he could get kicked out in 3 years, right? Probably not, but it's a possibility. Dude's crushing it right now. I mean, I keep saying to him, dude, slow down, take it back. So look, if you have that solid a business plan, even his advisor was like, nah, he's got it. We're good. That's great. But most 95% of everybody else, just remember, most coffee shops start out of a really small space. They don't start as Starbucks, right? So if you're out there looking for the space that Starbucks has and you want to have that kind of business, you got to be ready to pay that kind of rent, construction costs, and all that stuff, and that's a lot. So start with what you can. That's the best thing you can do.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our clients they don't even start with space. We touched on this a little bit before, but they start in vendor events. You go there, you brew your specialized coffee medley, wherever you got your beans, and you let that aroma, waft around and attract people, and then you start to build a clientele that way. And then that's a really great way to see who is interested in your product. And because then you can find that information, you can identify those customers, who's actually showing up and who's interested and who is making purchases.
So winding back to an earlier question, when are you ready for space? This is literally, if there was a Family Feud board of how you know you're ready for space. This would be on the right-hand side, but I hear it. My spouse was ready to kick me out of the house because I was making something at home, or I was taking up too much space at home, and they were ready to leave me. Like, that is, believe it or not, like, I hear that. And we just had a woman who ran like a small physical therapy practice out of her home, out of the garage. And it had gotten to the point where her husband was just like, I need the garage back. You need to go rent a space, even if I have to subsidize your rent to get you out of here. So so some people get more direct pushes into space, but like you said, even just a small room, to drink coffee and work is great.
Yeah, 100%. So Mark, if people are interested in contacting you and having you assist them with their decision-making process and looking at commercial real estate, both one, at what stage should they reach out to you in this process, and how would they do so?
So, so as far as what stage, the earlier the better, right? Like I would say I spend half of my day answering questions from people who are never going to actually start a business, which is totally okay with me. I think every dream has to get nurtured. I think everybody needs to work through the process. If you have if you're listening to this and you have an idea, like, number one, you're ahead of the game because you're here listening. I stress that with people who are working with the SBDC. A lot of people don't even get this far. So if you're here, way to go. Like, you're winning already. But as early as possible, and I don't charge anything, right, to answer questions. Like, I don't get paid until the leases get signed and you're in your space. But reach out, ask questions, lean on the SBDC or the SBA or whichever branch you're working with, because they're great. As far as where to find me, Mark Cardone. Just Google it. You'll get Grant a couple times, who I'm not related to. But he does follow me on Twitter. I think he's watching because he wants to catch me do something. But yeah, so markcardone.com is my website. If you follow me on Instagram or Facebook or any of the socials, we have a lot of fun. It's a lot of talking about new businesses that are opening and a couple dad jokes and stuff like that. So those are the best places to get me.
Outstanding.
Great.
Thanks, brother. We really appreciate you coming in and taking the time. And I hope that undoubtedly this is of value to the people that are watching. So thanks to everyone that showed up to watch. Thank you, Troy.
My pleasure.
You
Mark,
made
thank
this
you.
amazing. So both of you guys,
Yeah.
hats off. Thank you.
Thanks.